Arrest warrant has been issued for South Florida rapper Kodak Black. Officials say Bill Capri, better known as Kodak Black, violated the conditions of his pretrial release. This mugshot is from his initial arrest last year when troopers pulled him over for driving with an expired driver's license and tags and found
Kodak Black is facing a moment that could redefine his entire career and possibly his life. The sentencing is official, and the reaction is immediate. Fans are shocked, critics are relentless, and the hip-hop world is buzzing with speculation. For years, Kodak's rise seemed unstoppable, fueled by talent, charisma, and controversy in equal measure. But this sentencing isn't just a legal milestone. It's a turning point, signaling the close of one chapter and the uncertain opening of another. From the earliest mixtapes to stadium-sized shows, Kodak Black built a persona that thrived on boldness and rebellion. He challenged norms, pushed boundaries, and captured attention like few others. His music became the voice of a generation craving authenticity, raw storytelling, and street wisdom. Yet, alongside that meteoric rise, the controversies piled up. Legal battles, public feuds, and personal struggles that followed him like shadows. This sentencing now forces the world to confront a question everyone has been asking. What comes next? This isn't just about jail time or legal repercussions. It's about the impact on the culture, the industry, and the people who followed Kodak every step of the way. Social media erupted instantly, fans debating whether this marks the end of Kodak's influence or merely a pause before his next reinvention. Music insiders are weighing in, suggesting that the timing and consequences of this ruling could alter collaborations, record deals, and the power dynamics in the rap world. For Kodak himself, this moment is both a reckoning and an opportunity. The path forward is uncertain, but the story is far from over. Every lyric, every interview, and every move will now be scrutinized through a new lens, one that blends accountability with artistry, consequence with legacy. How he navigates this period could determine whether he cements his place as a hip-hop icon or becomes a cautionary tale of wasted potential. This sentencing marks the end of an era, but it also sets the stage for transformation. Kodak Black's journey has always been unpredictable, and now, more than ever, the world is watching to see whether he rises from this moment stronger, wiser, and more focused, or whether the turbulence of his past finally catches up with him. Whatever happens, one thing is clear. This is a defining chapter in a career that has never followed the conventional path, and the next moves could reshape the narrative of hip-hop forever. Kodak Black's life had always been a study in extremes, a combination of raw talent, street credibility, and an almost magnetic ability to draw attention. From his alias days releasing mixtapes, it was clear he had a unique voice, one that could cut through the noise and connect with a generation looking for authenticity. But that same path that brought him fame and influence also came with consequences. Legal troubles, personal conflicts, and public controversies seemed almost inevitable. And now, with his sentencing, the reality of that life had finally caught up with him. This wasn't just another headline. It was a defining moment, one that forced Kodak and the world around him to confront a reality long delayed. The early years of Kodak's rise were marked by an unrelenting work ethic. Behind the social media posts and viral videos, there were long nights in the studio, refining lyrics, experimenting with flows, and mastering his sound. His music reflected his environment, his experiences, and his mindset, raw, unfiltered, and unapologetic. Fans gravitated to that honesty, feeling that Kodak was speaking directly to them, not through polished corporate filters but from a place of real struggle and lived experience. That connection would later cement his place in the hip-hop landscape, making him not just an artist, but a voice of his generation. Yet the lifestyle that fueled his music also carried inherent risks. Kodak's street credibility and willingness to engage in conflict created a double-edged sword. While it amplified his authenticity and bolstered his image as someone who lived the realities he rapped about, it also opened the door to legal issues and violent encounters. Over time, patterns began to emerge. Incidents that might have been minor mistakes for others became headlines and legal battles for him. Each situation demanded attention, pulled him into courtrooms, or disrupted his career momentum. The consequences, once distant and abstract, began to pile up, revealing the fragility of life built on both brilliance and recklessness. Now, facing sentencing, Kodak had to reflect on the path that led here. This moment was not a surprise. Insiders, fans, and even Kodak himself knew the stakes had been building for years. What made this moment different, however, was its finality. Unlike past incidents that were mitigated or delayed, this sentencing carried weight that could alter his trajectory permanently. It wasn't just about time served or fines paid. It was about the implications for his career, his freedom, and his influence in the hip-hop world. Every deal, every collaboration, and every upcoming project now existed under a cloud of uncertainty, forcing Kodak to reassess priorities and strategies. Even in this tense period, Kodak's mindset remained a complex mix of resilience and reflection. Those close to him describe a young man aware of his mistakes, but unwilling to let setbacks define him completely. There's a pattern in his life. Each obstacle becomes a lesson, a source of material, and a chance for growth. He's no stranger to reinvention. His ability to adapt and evolve has always been part of what makes him compelling as an artist. This chapter, harsh as it may be, could become a crucible that forges an even stronger, more focused version of Kodak Black. The public reaction has been intense, reflecting both admiration and concern. Fans express loyalty, sharing clips, lyrics, and stories of how Kodak's music influenced their lives. Critics analyze the impact of his legal troubles on hip-hop culture, debating whether his sentencing marks the end of his era or merely a pause before reinvention. Industry insiders speculate on record deals, endorsements, and collaborations, understanding that the ripple effects extend far beyond the courtroom. Kodak's fate in this moment isn't just personal, it's cultural, impacting the music scene and the community that has followed him for years. Kodak's team has reportedly been working tirelessly to prepare for the consequences of the sentencing. Lawyers, managers, and close associates are coordinating strategies not just for legal outcomes, but for how he will emerge publicly afterward. Damage control isn't about spin. It's about protecting a legacy that has already made waves and could continue to do so if navigated correctly. Every move now must be intentional, measured, and calculated, a stark contrast to the impulsive decisions that characterized earlier stages of his career. As the sentencing date approached, Kodak's focus shifted internally. Long hours in the studio, introspective moments, and quiet reflection became central to his routine. Music remained a refuge, a way to process emotions and channel experiences. Lyrics that once celebrated bravado now carried layers of contemplation, responsibility, and perspective. Even fans began noticing a change in tone, subtle as it was, signaling that Kodak was thinking about legacy and long-term impact rather than short-term clout. This first stage of Kodak Black's sentencing period represents more than legal reality. It's the start of a reckoning with himself, with the industry, and with a public that has watched him rise, stumble, and triumph repeatedly. It's a moment that requires clarity, discipline, and resilience, demanding that he confront the consequences of choices made years ago while envisioning a path forward that can redefine not just his career, but his story entirely. In short, this isn't just the end of a legal chapter. It's a defining pivot in a life lived in extremes, where talent and turmoil have always intertwined, and where the decisions made now will echo far into the future of Kodak Black's legacy. As Kodak Black began to process the reality of his sentencing, the magnitude of the situation began to sink in. For years, he had navigated the rap game with a combination of raw talent, bravado, and a street-smart mindset that had kept him ahead of trouble, or at least, able to survive it. But this time, there was no escaping the weight of consequence. It was no longer a matter of bouncing back after another headline-making incident. This was something that could define him for years to come, shaping his legacy in a way that few moments in his life had before. The first challenge was internal. Kodak had always been a fighter, not just in the literal sense, but mentally, emotionally, and creatively. He had survived setbacks that would have derailed most artists, from legal battles to personal losses. But now, he faced the ultimate test: patience. For someone used to moving fast, making quick decisions, and asserting control over every situation, the forced stillness was almost unbearable. Yet it was in this stillness that he began to confront the patterns that had repeatedly put him in jeopardy. His team played a crucial role during this period, coordinating legal strategies while also managing his public image. Lawyers analyzed every possible outcome, from sentencing reductions to appeals, ensuring that Kodak had every opportunity to mitigate the impact of the court's decision. Managers and advisors, meanwhile, prepared him for the public response, crafting narratives that would maintain credibility and minimize backlash. Every detail was scrutinized: interviews, social media posts, public appearances, because in the court of public opinion, one misstep could have lasting consequences. While the external preparations were vital, it was the internal work that defined this stage. Kodak spent hours reflecting on his life choices, the consequences of impulsive decisions, and the ways he could redirect his energy moving forward. Music became a channel for this reflection, with lyrics capturing both regret and determination. Whereas past tracks often celebrated defiance and bravado, his newer work hinted at introspection, accountability, and strategic thinking. Friends and collaborators noted a subtle but noticeable shift, a maturing voice that was emerging, even amid the chaos. Physical health and routine also became a focus. In the past, Kodak's lifestyle had fluctuated wildly, often dictated by the demands of tours, studio sessions, and social obligations. But now, consistency became a form of self-preservation. Exercise, diet, and sleep were no longer optional. There were tools for mental clarity and resilience. Maintaining discipline in small, tangible ways helped him cope with the uncertainty looming over his career. Even the simplest routines, like morning workouts or structured studio time, reinforced a sense of control during a period that otherwise felt unpredictable. Relationships also came under scrutiny. Kodak began evaluating the people in his life, identifying those who truly had his best interests at heart versus those who thrived on chaos or opportunism. Old friends and acquaintances who had once encouraged reckless behavior were distanced, while loyal supporters were leaned on for guidance, accountability, and emotional support. This restructuring wasn't easy. It required honesty and difficult conversations, but it also created a circle of trust that provided the stability he needed to focus on the long term rather than immediate gratification. Public perception remained another layer of challenge. The media was relentless, social media was buzzing, and fans were divided between support and criticism. Kodak had to navigate this landscape carefully, balancing authenticity with strategy. Every post, every public interaction, and every response to speculation carried potential consequences. For an artist whose career thrived on visibility, this was a delicate balance. Oversharing could undermine legal strategy, while silence could fuel doubt or misinterpretation. Learning to communicate thoughtfully became an unexpected skill in this phase. Mentally, Kodak confronted fear. Fear of confinement, fear of missed opportunities, fear of being forgotten. But he also began to see potential. He realized that this period, as challenging as it was, offered a unique chance to reset, to rebuild, and to refine not just his craft but his approach to life. Each day of preparation became a rehearsal for resilience, teaching him to focus on what he could control while accepting what he could not. As part 2 of this journey unfolded, it became clear that Kodak Black's response to sentencing would not just define the outcome of his legal situation, but could reshape his entire career. This was a pivotal moment where strategy, discipline, and personal growth intersected, creating the foundation for the next chapter. For an artist whose life had been marked by extremes, this period of introspection and preparation might prove to be the most crucial of all. By confronting his patterns, building structure, and fostering intentional relationships, Kodak began to reclaim agency over his life. The sentencing wasn't just a setback, it was a test of resilience, vision, and adaptability. And in that challenge lay the potential to transform Kodak Black from a headline-making figure into a lasting, influential voice in hip-hop. As Kodak Black moved deeper into the aftermath of his sentencing, The stakes became more tangible than ever. This wasn't a situation that could be fixed overnight, nor was it something that could be shrugged off with flashy singles or viral moments. The reality was inescapable. The decisions he made now would reverberate through the next phase of his life, defining not just his career but the way the world would remember him. This stage was about accountability, reflection, and strategic planning, a process far removed from the impulsive choices that had defined much of his past. Mentally, Kodak had to confront the weight of his actions. In the past, setbacks were often met with defiance or distraction, but the sentencing demanded introspection. Every misstep, every controversial decision, and every impulsive moment suddenly had a consequence attached to it. For someone who had thrived on momentum, control, and visibility, this was unfamiliar territory. The challenge was not simply legal, it was emotional and psychological. He had to navigate guilt, anxiety, and frustration while simultaneously plotting a way forward. Music remained his anchor. Studio sessions took on a new significance, not as a platform for bravado but as a vehicle for processing experience. Tracks created during this period were layered with reflection, accountability, and the complexities of navigating life under public scrutiny. Collaborators noted a shift in tone. Lyrics that once celebrated rebellion now conveyed strategic thinking and personal growth. Every verse, every beat, became a statement of focus, proving that even in uncertain times, Kodak could channel energy into creation rather than chaos. The physical grind also intensified. Kodak's team emphasized conditioning, stamina, and discipline, not just for performance in the studio or on stage, but as a metaphor for mental resilience. Long hours of training, cardio routines, and strength conditioning were paired with structured recovery and attention to diet. Small decisions, like hydration, sleep, and rest, became critical tools in sustaining clarity during a period fraught with uncertainty. In essence, every action, whether in the gym, studio, or at home, was deliberate, calculated, and meaningful. Relationships underwent intense evaluation. Kodak's circle, once sprawling and inconsistent, became focused on accountability. Old friends who thrived on drama or encouraged reckless behavior were distanced, while loyal supporters who prioritized long-term growth were elevated. Every connection was assessed for value, trustworthiness, and alignment with Kodak's new goals. The restructuring of his personal network was uncomfortable but essential, forcing him to recognize who genuinely supported him and who merely fed the chaos. Public scrutiny added an additional layer of pressure. Social media buzzed with speculation. Reactions ranged from loyalty to criticism, and the media dissected every development. Unlike previous moments in his career, this wasn't a situation where attention alone could validate him. Kodak had to remain focused, filtering out noise while maintaining authenticity. Every public statement, social media post, or interview carried weight. Missteps could undermine not only his legal strategy, but also the trust he was rebuilding with fans and collaborators. Learning restraint became a skill as valuable as any technical ability. Mentally, Kodak began preparing for longer-term implications. By the time Kodak Black reached this stage of his journey, the intensity of his situation had settled into a daily reality. The initial shock of sentencing had passed, and what remained was the steady, sometimes grueling work of managing the aftermath. This wasn't about fleeting headlines or viral moments. It was about sustaining focus, navigating consequences, and preparing for the next chapter of a life and career that had been built on talent but constantly threatened by impulsive choices. The pressure was unrelenting, yet Kodak began to find clarity in structure. The physical demands remained high. Long hours in the studio and at the gym were balanced with periods of rest and recovery, each component carefully planned. Conditioning was no longer just about stamina for performances, it had become a metaphor for resilience. Every run, every sparring session, every late-night beat-making session reinforced mental toughness. Kodak began to recognize that physical discipline translated directly into emotional and cognitive control, helping him process stress without reacting impulsively. Mentally, this stage forced Kodak to confront patterns he had long ignored. His past choices had repeatedly landed him in legal and public trouble, and now there was no room to deflect responsibility. He examined how relationships, decisions, and impulsive reactions had contributed to his current situation. Rather than succumbing to regret or self-pity, he approached these reflections strategically. Every insight became a tool to anticipate future risks and to implement preventive measures in both personal and professional spheres. Relationships were a central focus. Kodak's inner circle had shrunk significantly, but the remaining members were those who truly prioritized his well-being and success. This wasn't just about loyalty, it was about accountability. Trusted friends and collaborators pushed him to maintain consistency, offering guidance without drama. Old associates who thrived on chaos or opportunism were purposefully removed from the equation. This restructuring of his support system allowed Kodak to focus on growth without the distractions that had historically derailed him. The public and media continued to exert pressure. Social media commentary, news speculation, and fan expectations created a constant background noise. Unlike earlier in his career, Kodak now had to engage selectively. Oversharing could compromise his strategy, while silence might fuel misinterpretation. Navigating this landscape required patience, restraint, and calculated communication, skills he was now learning to value as much as lyrical skill or stage presence. Creatively, Kodak's work took on a new depth. Whereas his music had previously celebrated boldness, defiance, and immediate gratification, his recent output reflected introspection, responsibility, and perspective. Lyrics were laid with nuance, balancing honesty about past mistakes with determination to evolve. Collaborators noticed a subtle but meaningful shift. The artist who once prioritized shock value now emphasized thoughtfulness and narrative control. Each project became a statement, signaling that Kodak's artistry could endure even under scrutiny. Motherhood, family, and personal commitments further shaped his daily routine. Kodak had begun to see the broader impact of his choices, not only on himself but on those who depended on him or looked up to him. The realization that personal discipline could influence more than his career added a layer of motivation. His sense of purpose was no longer solely tied to fame or status, but to leaving a lasting impact and building stability. Legal considerations remained ever present. Every move had to be weighed against potential consequences, forcing Kodak to adopt a strategic mindset. Plans were made meticulously, from court appearances to public interactions, ensuring that no impulsive action could jeopardize the groundwork he was rebuilding. This level of careful planning, while exhausting at times, instilled a sense of control he had rarely felt in his career. By the end of this phase, Kodak's evolution was evident, even to outsiders. The impulsive, unpredictable artist still existed in flashes, but he had layered those traits with intentionality, foresight, and discipline. This stage wasn't flashy, and it wasn't viral. It was the kind of quiet transformation that only shows itself in consistency over time. In short, this period represented consolidation and preparation. Kodak Black had faced the consequences of his choices, reflected on his past, and intentionally structured his life and career for long-term sustainability. Every decision, every relationship, and every creative output had become part of a larger strategy, a careful balance between accountability, artistry, and personal growth. This was no longer survival mode. It was a calculated evolution, setting the stage for the final chapter of his transformation. As Kodak Black entered the final phase of this pivotal chapter in his life, the weight of every previous decision became starkly clear. This wasn't a phase of flashy headlines, viral moments, or impulsive stunts. It was a stage defined by reflection, accountability, and the painstaking work of securing a lasting legacy. For an artist who had built his career on raw talent, street credibility, and moments of brilliance, this phase demanded mastery of a different kind: self-discipline, strategic foresight, and emotional resilience. The physical grind remained intense. Days began early, structured around studio sessions, workouts, and deliberate rest periods. Every movement was calculated. Workouts weren't just about stamina or strength. They were exercises in patience, endurance, and mental focus. Boxing-style conditioning, agility drills, and cardio routines became a metaphor for the challenges he faced outside the gym. Each time his body pushed through exhaustion, it reinforced his ability to navigate stress and make decisions under pressure. Physical control translated into mental control, a skill Kodak had often lacked in earlier years. Mentally, this stage was about confronting legacy. Kodak reflected on the decisions that had shaped his life, both positive and negative. He recognized patterns, impulsive reactions, misplaced trust, and choices that prioritized instant gratification over long-term stability. Instead of letting these patterns define him, he studied them, learned from them, and implemented strategies to prevent repetition. This period required him to remain consistently self-aware, to pause before acting, and to consider the ripple effect of each decision on his career, reputation, and personal life. Relationships continued to evolve. Kodak's inner circle had been refined, leaving only those who genuinely contributed to his growth. Loyalty, accountability, and alignment became non-negotiable. Friends, family, and collaborators who had previously enabled reckless behavior were removed, replaced by those who demanded consistency and encouraged focus. This shift wasn't easy. It required difficult conversations and moments of confrontation. But by creating a circle of trust, Kodak protected himself from distractions that had historically derailed his momentum. Public perception remained a pressure point. Social media, fans, and the media at large were relentless, analyzing every move, reaction, and post. However, Kodak had learned to filter this noise. Oversharing could compromise his strategy, while silence might fuel speculation. Striking the balance between transparency and discretion became a new skill, one as vital as lyrical skill or stage presence. He began to understand that legacy isn't built in reaction to public opinion, but in deliberate, consistent action over time. Creatively, Kodak's work took on new layers. Music that once celebrated rebellion, bravado, and instant gratification now reflected maturity, reflection, and long-term vision. Lyrics explored accountability, personal growth, and the consequences of choices, blending vulnerability with strategic thinking. Collaborators noticed the change. The same magnetic, bold energy existed, but it was now paired with focus, intentionality, and narrative control. His art became both a therapeutic outlet and a strategic tool to maintain relevance while navigating uncertainty. Family and personal responsibility became increasingly central. Kodak recognized the broader impact of his actions, not just on himself, but on those who depended on him or looked up to him. This added a layer of motivation previously absent from his daily routine. Stability, structure, and consistent behavior weren't just professional tools. They were foundational to protecting his family and fostering a sense of long-term security. Legal considerations remained an undercurrent in every choice. Court dates, potential rulings, and compliance obligations demanded vigilance. Even seemingly small actions, social media posts, public appearances, or interactions, were carefully measured. Kodak adopted a strategic mindset that required foresight, patience, and disciplined execution. This was a skill he had rarely exercised in his earlier years but had now become essential. By the close of this final stage, Kodak Black had evolved. Impulsivity and chaos still existed in flashes, but they were tempered by foresight, discipline, and intentional decision-making. The artist who once relied on momentum and attention for validation now valued strategy, consistency, and long-term vision. This stage wasn't about immediate results. It was about creating a foundation for sustained growth, both personally and professionally. Ultimately, this chapter was about transformation. Kodak Black had confronted the consequences of his past, structured his life for stability, and aligned his actions with long-term goals. The challenges were significant, but the lessons were profound. Through discipline, reflection, and strategic planning, he had not just survived this pivotal moment. He had set the stage for the next era of his life, one defined by resilience, clarity, and a renewed commitment to building a lasting legacy. This phase marked the culmination of accountability, demonstrating that even amid chaos, focused intention can redefine a career in life that once seemed on the brink of derailment. If Kodak Black's journey has kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for all the latest updates on his career and life. This isn't just a story about music or headlines. It's about resilience, growth, and how someone can confront their past while building a path toward a lasting legacy. Kodak's story reminds us that talent alone isn't enough. Discipline, reflection, and strategic decisions define whether someone truly endures. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Kodak will bounce back stronger after this chapter? Or has this moment changed the trajectory of his career forever? Share your opinions, debate with other fans, and help keep the conversation alive. Every like, share, and subscription helps bring these stories to more people who want insight into the highs, lows, and lessons of the music industry. Stay tuned, because the next chapter could reshape everything you thought you knew about Kodak Black.